What's up, everybody? This is Jay, and welcome to my Season 8, Episode 1 recap of Game of Thrones Winterfell. Now, let's hop into it. Now, it starts off with a little lad, and he's running through the snow, just like in Episode 1, Season 1, of what Arya was doing and Bran was doing when King Robert was coming. And we see the army and the Unsullied and everything. We see Jon Snow with Daenerys riding on the high horse. But this time, we see Arya standing in the crowd, and she almost said something to Jon, but she kept her composure. Meanwhile, Tyrion is riding inside the wheelhouse, and he's saying, hey, you're lucky. At least you're not freezing your balls off. And he said, hey, you always making eunuch jokes. Why you make that if you don't like dwarf jokes? He said, hey, I can't help it. I got balls. I might be small, but my nuts are big. Hey, I can't help it. Beautiful Miss Andre, and everybody in the crowd is staring at them like it's Django Unchained. Meanwhile, Jon Snow and Daenerys are talking. She say they don't pretty much like me here. He said, hey, I told you, they don't trust outsiders in the north. All of a sudden, the dragons flew over. Everybody got scared, started running, and she smiled like, yeah, my children have put them in check. And even Sansa saw them and was looking like, wow, these dragons are real. And so Jon dismounts his horse, and he sees Bran, and he runs over to him and gives him a hug and a kiss. He like, look at you. You're a man now. And then he's smiling happy because he hadn't seen him in so long. And he said, man. He said, you a man? He said, almost, because now he's the three-eyed raven. Then he gives Sansa a hug, and she got her eye on Daenerys. And then little mama Mormont got her eye. She mean mugging. And Daenerys says, man, the north is beautiful, and so are you. She says, the north is yours, your grace. But she didn't want to say that, and Daenerys is smiling happy. And then next thing you know, Bran like, hey, cut that short. We ain't got time for this. The Night King is coming, and he got one of your dragons, and the wall is down, and they're on the way. So let's get together. Let's get moving. And so he put everybody in check. Meanwhile, they having a meeting, and they're discussing what's going on, and they call Lord Umber, little baby Lord. And then they say, where's your men? He said he need more horses and wagons. They say they give it to him, so he take off. Then Lady Mormont hop up because Lord Umber called them my lord. She like, yeah, you left as a king. Now, I don't know what you are. Are you a lord or what? And he said, that was the greatest honor of my life. But I had to, do what I had to do to save the north. And she said, well, we named you king in the north. And so then Tyrion, he popped up and tried to help. He like, look, Jon Snow brought us together. He risked his life to show us the truth. We now have 2 dragons, the largest army in the world. And then she says, yeah, and what are they going to eat? I didn't plan on feeding all of this. And what do 2 dragons eat anyway? And Daenerys like, whatever they want, biatch. Meanwhile, we see Lord Royce and Sansa, and they was talking and conversating, and then Tyrion wobbled on over, and so she knew it was time to have a little one-on-one convo. And so she said, so I haven't seen you since Joffrey's wedding. And he said, yeah, I haven't seen you, and it was sorry I had to run out so fast. He said, hey, it was hard for me to explain. It was a horrible affair. She said it wasn't that bad, actually. And meanwhile, we see Jon into the woods, God's woods, and he's praying. Then all of a sudden, Arya pops up behind him. And she's like, you used to be taller. He said, hey, how'd you sneak up on me like that? And so then they hug and embrace because they were both like the 2 little runts of the family. And then she pulls out Needle and she shows him. He like, you still have it? And she says, yeah. He said, have you used it at all? She said, a little. And so he's happy, and then he pulls out his, and she showed him hers. He showed her his, and so he like, she like Valerian steel. He like, you jealous? She said, it's a little too big for me. And so they smile or whatever. He said, where were you earlier? I could have used your help with Sansa. And she says, she's the smartest person I know. She's only trying to protect the family. He's like, what? You defending her? She said, she's just trying to do what's right with the family. He said, it's my family too. And so then they look, and she says, just don't forget that. And then they hug and embrace. Meanwhile, back in Westeros, we see Cersei, and then Qyburn comes up, and he tells her, I got bad news. The wall is falling. And so she's like, good. Meanwhile, we see the Greyjoy ship with Euron, and he's with the Golden Company commander, and they got ships full of people. And so he's saying, he goes under deck, and he's like, so you want to drink? She's like, no, I don't want to drink with you. He's like, why not? Who else can I talk to? And then she says, look, we're the last 2 Greyjoys alive. But she said, you chose the wrong side. He said, who cares? I'm going to bang that queen first, and leaves. And she mad because she wanted to taste a little of that fish sandwich. Meanwhile, we see Cersei in the throne room and getting the inventory from the Golden Company, and she's salty because he don't have the elephants. He said, man, they don't make a good voyage. And then she's saying, okay, well, I'm glad you're here. And he said, what about me? And she said, well, you're a good friend of the crown. He said, a friend? That's it? I wanted to hope we could talk alone. She said, if you want a whore, then go buy one. You want a queen, go earn one. And she's walking away. He said, well, how? I've got her justice. I brought her an army, the Iron Fleet. My heart is broken. And then she turned. She said, you know, you're very insolent. I've killed lesser men for that, for lesser things. He said, yeah, but they were lesser men. And so then that was a good comeback. She walking away. Then she thought about it for a second. And then she realized it's been a while, so she had them pipes clean, and she could use a good chimney sweep on deck. So she gives him the eye and let him know, bring your ass on over here. And he smiled. He ready to go ahead and knock them dust off that ass. Meanwhile, we see Braun, and he's with his little three-piece special. And then we see Qyburn walk in like Mr. Rogers, spoiling the party. And so he said the queen said it's urgent news. And then one of the freaks talking about, ooh, I like older men. Let me know if you want time. He said, pity girl. The pox will take her within a year. He damn near choked because he was making sure it was the one he wasn't banging real quick. And then he says, look, the queen has a special assignment for you. He said, if she wants me to kill the Targaryen girl, forget about it. She said, no, it's other plans for her. But her 2 brothers, use this. It's poetic justice. And she already has 2 carts full of gold waiting for you. And he looks at the thing, and that's the same crossbow Tyrion used to kill their daddy. Meanwhile, we see Greyjoy getting his pants on, Euron, and he like, so, how did I do compared to the fat king? And she like, oh, you just disrespected my late husband. He say, are you offended? She said, well, Robert, he had a different whore every night, but he still didn't know what he was doing. He said, well, what about the Kingslayer? She said, oh, you like risking your neck, don't you? And he said, well, hey, life is boring, and I like a little excitement. She say, well, this one thing I'll give you, you're not boring, that's for sure. And he says, well, hey, do I please the queen? Because I want to put a little prince in that belly, not realizing that that apartment was already occupied. But she gave him a little smile, and that gave her a crazy idea, something that she's used to doing. Meanwhile, we see on the Greyjoy fleet, these dudes are starting to get took out one eye at a time by these archers. And so next thing you know, one dude fall where Yara was. He done been turned into a crackhead. And next thing you know, we see it's Theon. He pulls out his little blade, frees her, and then the next thing you know, she gives him a little head, Greyjoy style, to thank him for saving her life, but also to punish him for leaving her to be a captive. And so she gives him a hand and helps him up to let him know, all right, we even now. So we see them on the fleet, and she's saying, hey, we're going to sail back to the Iron Islands because he can't protect it, and we can get our home back. And he's looking at her, and she said, you want to go back and fight with Daenerys? He said, well, she went north, but you're my queen. And she says, look, go back with them, fight with the Starks. What is dead may never die. And so they embrace, and he says, hey, but go and kill the bastards anyway. Meanwhile, back at Winterfell, we see Tyrion and the old dudes, the 3 wise men, they walking, and you see the Onion Knight. He's telling her about the proposal that he has for the Daenerys, and he's saying, well, what is this proposal? He said, well, actually the proposal is a marriage. Maybe this could be a union by a king and a queen. He said they do make a cute couple. And while they're looking, they're talking, and they're deciding what's going on. And she's saying, look, the North don't really trust me, and your sister don't like me. He said, well, she doesn't know you yet, but she never liked me either, so she'll get to know you. Then the Dothraki come, and she asks what's going on, and they ain't eating. They only ate 18 goats and other stuff, and she say, man, the dragons are barely eating. So she goes to check on them, and we see it's nothing but barbecue goat meat all over the place, and so she giving them a little rub down. They all friendly in front of her and Jon is not scared of them. And then she hops on the horse, on the dragon, and tells him to hop on. He like, well, what if he doesn't want me to get on? She said, well, I enjoyed your company while it lasts. And then she holds her smile while he tries to hop on. And he like, I don't know how to ride a dragon. And she says, nobody does until they do. He said, well, what do I hold on to? She says, whatever you can. And so he grabbed something to hold on to, and before he got a good grip, then Rhaego, which is named after his father, little did he know, takes off in flight, and she's smiling and proud that, damn, this dude he's fearless. And then they fly past Winterfell. Everybody sees him riding the dragon just like her, and he's getting his dragon on, and she's looking like, damn, he's doing pretty good. And then they fly and land at this place where he used to hunt as a kid, and she says, this is so beautiful. We could stay here for 1,000 years and nobody would know. He said, yeah, but we would get pretty old. Besides, it's kind of cold here for a southern girl, don't you think? And she says, oh, well, if that's the case, why don't you warm your queen up? And so he starts smooching and kissing, tonguing her down. And then he looks to the side and sees that the dragon is looking all in there like, hey, man, what you doing with my mama? Meanwhile, back at Winterfell, we see Gendry, and he's making weapons out of dragon glass, and the Hound comes, and he has this special battle axe made. And so he says, man, it wasn't easy making that. And so he starts giving him a hard time when Arya say, leave him alone. And then he looks, he says, I heard you was here. Last time I saw you, you left me for dead. She said, yeah, but I robbed you first, didn't I? And he says, ooh, you a cold little thing, ain't you? Maybe that's why you're still alive. And then she looks at him, give him a little stare down, and then he walks off, kind of with a smirk, like he proud of her that she came a long way. And then she says to Gendry, you look good. How you doing? He said, well, you look good too, my lady. She said, don't call me that. And that was a flashback from season 1, and they smile, and then she gave him the plans for this special weapon she wants. She said, can you make this? He said, what you need with this? You already got a sword, and you got that. What is that? And then she shows him the Valyrian dagger, and he said, boy, I always knew you was a rich girl. She said, I'm the only rich girl you know. Make the weapon. And then she walks off. Meanwhile, we see Sansa, and she's reading the letter from the Glovers saying that they not coming. And she said, he said he would be there, but he's not. He said, yeah, they said like 1,000 years and for the Starks and the Glovers together. She said, yeah, but he wanted to support the king in the north. He said, look, we can argue about my titles, but we can't win without her. She says, yeah, but you gave up your title of king in the north. He said, look, we could not have won without her help. Do you trust me? She says, of course. He said, well, what else could I have done? She said, did you choose her because she's good, or you love her? And that kind of put a thought in his head. He was quiet. Meanwhile, we see Daenerys and Mormont, and they're walking, and they find Sam. She says, so you're the man. He like, which man is that? She said, you're the man that saved him when others refused. And he said, well, others could have, but they just wouldn't. And he said, well, I'm glad. She says, I have to give you a reward. What can I do for you? He said, well, I could use a pardon. I took some books when I left. And she said, and a sword. She says, a sword? He says, yeah, from House Tarly. And she says, oh, it wouldn't be Randall Tarly, would it? He said, yeah, how you know? She said, well, your father stood against me, and I offered him to give him his lands if he bent the knee, but he didn't, and so he knew he was dead. Even Mormont felt bad. He said, well, at least my brother let me come home. She said, your brother stood with him. And then he was about to bust up crying for real, and he walked off holding his composure barely. And so once he got outside, he was walking outside. He saw Big Wheel standing right there living the crip life, and he's like, hey, man, what you doing out here? He said, I'm waiting on an old friend. And he said, okay, well, he said, what's up? He said, it's time to tell Jon the truth. He said, well, shouldn't you tell him the truth? You're his brother. He said, no, you're more of his brother than me. He trusts you more than anyone. You are brothers of the Night's Watch. It's time to tell Jon the truth so that he knows what's going on. And so now Sam is confused. He don't want to be the one, but he knows he got to be the one. So Jon was in the crypts, and he was sitting there looking at his father and everybody. The next thing you know, Sam come waddling in there, and so they embrace, they give a hug, and he gives Sam a hug. He like, so how are you? He said, I'm doing all right. But did you know about what Daenerys did? He said, what you mean? He said, she killed my father and my brother. And then he says, well, I had to kill people that disobeyed me. And he said, yeah, but you also let all the wildlings live when they refused to bend the knee. He said, yeah, but I wasn't a king then. And he said, yes, but you always were. He said, no, I gave up my title of king in the north. He said, not king of the north, king of the 7 kingdoms. And Jon couldn't get it. He like, what? What are you talking about? He said, your father is Rhaegon Targaryen and your mother was Lyanna Stark and they were married. He said, get out of here. My father was the most honorable man I ever know. You telling me he was a liar? He said, no. Lord Stark, he said that he would protect you. And so that's why he did that. If King Robert found out the truth, he would have killed you. And so now Jon is confused. He said, this is treason. He said, but it's not. Gave up your title for the good of the people. Will she do the same? Meanwhile, we see at Last Hearth, where the Umbers stay and the little boy went, they see the wildling and the rest of the people come there, as well as others, and they see that everybody's gone and that everybody's dead. Blood everywhere, so they're going inside looking to see what's going on. We see Ben Derek and Tormund, and next thing you know, you see the Night's Watch come around the corner, and they are all about to scream and fight. He said, look out, his eyes are blue. He said, my eyes have always been blue. And so then he looked and they realize, oh, he all right. And so then they laugh for a second, embrace. They go through the rest of the place, looking out through the castle, and then they see little baby nuts nailed to the wall with the little White Walker symbol displayed on the wall around him, with arms and legs. And so while they're talking about it, next thing you know, he wakes up kicking and screaming, and Ben Derek kills him with the flaming sword and burns him alive. And so they all are wondering, like, damn, they said, man, the White Walkers are between us and Winterfell. We got to get the horses double up and try to get there and let everybody know they are almost here. And so meanwhile, back in Winterfell, we see this guy in a cloak riding in, and next thing you know, he hop off, and it's Jaime Lannister. And right when he get off, he looks around, and sure enough, we see Brandon standing there ready to roll out on his ass, and they have a big stare down at each other. And then he realized that was the old friend he was waiting for. In the end, this episode was really good, but it was really just a warm-up. They'd only killed the little dude, the little Lord Umber, because I guess they wanted to give us time to get used to our characters one last time before they chop them all to bits. Since it's 6 episodes and it's a lot of people that's going to die, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen in this first battle. I'm predicting that they're going to lose this first battle and then have to retreat or something. We saw that Yara Greyjoy said that she's going to go to the Iron Islands and give Daenerys a place to go if she has to retreat. And so Theon will probably relay that message that, hey, if you all are getting your ass kicked, this is where you need to go to retreat. And I think something like that may happen. In the end, I just can't wait for this next episode to come out. I'm looking at your comments, interested to see who do you all think is going to die in episode 2. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching. I want to give a special thanks to my biggest fans and supporters that support my work at patreon.com. Without you, I wouldn't be able to grow my channel. You guys got a special place in my success. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.